Imagine like 80,000 people packed into this massive concrete bowl.
Oh, yeah. A
Yeah.
total sea of humanity.
Right. And they've spent absolute fortunes for this. I mean, we're talking booking international flights, paying mortgage-level prices for hotel rooms, hunting down secondary market tickets.
Just an unbelievable amount of money and effort.
Exactly. And what are they doing once they finally sit down? For 2 straight hours, all 80,000 of them are just staring at one single soccer ball like a bunch of meerkats.
I love that image. The meerkat thing is so accurate.
It's jarring, right? But that's the vivid hook of the source material we're exploring today. So, welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to unpack a really fascinating sermon.
Yeah, today's sermon.
Right, a sermon that basically takes our culture's absolute obsession with, bigger is better and completely flips it upside down.
It really does. And that World Cup setup from the sermon is just staggering because when you think about it, over 3.8 million people attend those events.
Which is a record, right?
Yeah, a total record. You've got stadiums from Seattle to Miami just packed. And when 80,000 people roar in unison, it literally shakes the ground beneath your feet.
It's pure, undeniable energy. And watching those massive, passionate crowds, it creates a really natural human question.
For sure.
You look at all that unified enthusiasm and you can't help to think, wouldn't God just love that? Like, wouldn't a stadium of 80,000 people roaring for him be the ultimate goal of any faith?
I mean, logically, yes. Based on how we measure success, that makes perfect sense.
Right. We love big numbers.
We do.
Yeah.
But the core thesis of today's sermon introduces this really profound pivot. It points out that sports might actually be the new modern religion.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there are even sociologists who blame the rise of European football for the decline of European Christianity.
That is wild.
Right. But biblically speaking, the sermon argues that God just doesn't share our cultural obsession with stadium-sized numbers. His math is, it's entirely different.
Well, let's look at that math, because honestly, on paper, it feels like a terrible business strategy.
Oh, completely.
Because we are so conditioned to believe that more people equals more success. If a restaurant has a line out the door, the food must be amazing.
Exactly. Or if a startup gets 1 million users, it's instantly a unicorn.
Right. And we do this in religious and community circles, too. We set these, like, corporate milestones.
Yeah, like you need 100 people to be viable, then 250 to afford a building.
And then 1,000 people before you're considered a real success story.
But the sermon pulls from Matthew 18:20 to just totally shatter that ladder climbing mindset.
Okay, what does that say?
It points out that God's presence requires only, quote, 2 or 3 gathered.
Just 2 or 3, not 2 or 3,000.
Exactly. Just 2 or 3 individuals. And then the text contrasts our whole metric-chasing obsession with Luke 15:7.
Which is the one about the lost sheep.
Right. Yeah, that famous concept. There is more joy in heaven over one single repenting sinner than over 99 righteous people who don't even need to repent.
Okay, wait, I have to pause here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I want to look at this through the lens of anyone listening who runs a team or a project or a business.
Yeah, the practical side.
Right. On paper, abandoning the 99 is a disastrous retention strategy.
It really is.
If I run a company and I ignore 99 of my most loyal paying customers just to track down one guy who unsubscribed, I mean, my board of directors is going to fire me on the spot.
Oh, 100%. From a capitalist, retention-based mindset, it's a total failure of leadership.
You are risking your core demographic for an absolute outlier.
But that's the paradigm shift the sermon introduces. It talks about this concept of the missional church.
Okay, break that down for me.
So the fundamental idea is that a faith community does not exist for the 99 people already inside it.
Wait, really? Not for the insiders?
No, it exists entirely for the one soul outside of it. The community isn't supposed to be a retention center. It's a rescue boat.
Oh, man. So the gathering itself isn't the end goal?
Exactly.
The gathering is just the vehicle to reach the person who isn't even in the room yet.
Precisely. And to ground this, the speaker in the sermon shares this fantastic personal anecdote about visiting Korea.
Oh, yeah, after they've been living in a U.S. immigrant community for years, right?
Right. And they describe this sudden, unexpected thrill of just being surrounded by people who spoke their native language.
Like a huge barrier was just lifted.
Exactly. And it wasn't about, shouting a message on a street corner. The sermon actually explicitly notes that modern culture is totally deaf to that approach anyway.
Oh, for sure. No one wants to be yelled at.
Right. But because those linguistic and cultural barriers were lowered in Korea, It allowed for natural, unforced gospel conversations.
It just removes the friction. You're just living life alongside people.
Yeah, like the speaker talks about just chatting with a roommate in a hospital or having a normal conversation with a guest house owner.
Just everyday stuff.
Exactly. Everyday interactions where their faith just naturally surfaced. And the payoff of this story is crucial. Out of those casual interactions, one person simply said, you know what? I think I'll try going to church.
Wow. Just that simple.
Just that simple. And the sermon argues that to God, the sound of that one single person deciding to turn their life around
Is infinitely louder than the stadium.
yes, it's sweeter to him than 80,000 meerkats singing in perfect stadium harmony.
I love that. That one shifting heart totally outweighs the roaring crowd.
It really does.
But, this forces a really uncomfortable realization.
Oh, how so?
Well, if God is so desperately seeking just one soul, why is it so incredibly hard to find them?
That is the big question.
Right. It seems like society constantly defaults back to focusing on the 99. We build the massive stadium, we get comfortable, and then we close the doors.
We definitely do.
So what actually happens when a culture completely loses sight of this outward mission?
Well, the sermon diagnoses this exact societal collapse, and it does it by diving into the book of Ezekiel.
Chapter 22, right?
Yes. Ezekiel 22. It outlines 4 groups of people in the ancient nation of Judah. And conveniently, for English speakers anyway, they all start with a P.
Oh, the 4 Ps. Love a good
It
alliteration.
makes it easy to remember.
Yeah.
And the way these groups interact, it's basically a masterclass in systemic decay. It's a chain reaction.
So where does it start?
It starts at the top of the cultural food chain with the prophets.
Okay, the spiritual communicators.
Right. And verse 25 describes them as roaring lions tearing the prey, taking treasure and precious things.
Jeez. So they are essentially devouring human lives for profit.
Exactly. They turn preaching and truth-telling into this predatory, extraction-based business.
Wow.
And the sermon draws a really sharp historical contrast here with the Apostle Paul from the New Testament.
How so?
Well, Paul operated in this Greek society that was just teeming with itinerant speakers and traveling philosophers.
Oh, like the ancient equivalent of the paid seminar circuit?
Yes. You had to monetize your platform. It was culturally expected that you'd charge hefty fees for your wisdom.
But Paul actively refused to do that, didn't he?
He did. He chose to work this grueling manual labor job making tents just so he could offer his message completely free of charge.
That's incredible. Just to prove his motives were pure.
Right. He took the financial burden completely off the listener. It removed any suspicion that he was just another one of those roaring lions looking for a payout.
Because when the spiritual leaders prioritize their own wealth, the credibility of the entire system just fractures.
It completely crumbles.
And if the people who are supposed to be speaking the highest truths are just doing it for a paycheck, the actual moral lines of the society are going to evaporate overnight.
Which brings us directly to the next domino falling.
The next P.
Yes, the priests, in verse 26. Their failure was a failure of distinction.
What do you mean by distinction?
God calls them out for failing to distinguish between what was holy meaning set apart for him and what was common, or just belonging to the world.
Ah, so they just blurred the lines until there was no boundary left.
Exactly. And to illustrate what losing that boundary really means, the sermon highlights this fascinating historical detail about the Sabbath.
Okay, the Sabbath. I feel like we take the weekend completely for granted now.
We totally do. It's just a structural part of our calendar.
Yeah, you work 5 days, you rest 2. But in the ancient world, it was a massive disruption, wasn't it?
It was radical. Ancient pagans had absolutely no concept of a 7-day week.
Really? None at all.
None. They worked when the harvest demanded it, and they rested randomly when they could. Time was incredibly fluid.
So when the Jewish people started universally stopping all work every single 7th day,
Regardless of the weather or the harvest or the economy,
that must have looked completely insane to the outside world.
it really did.
It's the ultimate loss of productivity. You can just imagine neighboring cultures thinking, we are going to outproduce you, outfarm you, and outtrade you while you just sit around doing nothing for 24 hours.
Exactly. But that weirdness, that absolute refusal to blend in with the constant grind of the world, that is exactly what holiness means.
Because it's noticeably set apart?
Yes. And historically, outsiders eventually started observing this rhythm. They realized that working hard for 6 days and truly resting for 1 day actually made the community healthier.
And more effective, probably.
Oh, absolutely. It was a boundary that actually drew people in because it offered a better way to live.
Wow.
And the sermon reminds you, the listener, that believers today are called royal priests. You are supposed to maintain these distinct boundaries rather than just blending into the cultural noise.
Okay, let's follow this chain reaction then. If the communicators are corrupt and the moral boundaries have been totally erased by the priests,
Then the political and economic leaders are just going to have a field day.
enter the princes.
Yes, the princes in verse 27, the societal leaders. They are described as wolves shedding blood and destroying lives for dishonest gain.
Wow, lions and wolves.
Yeah, a lot of predatory imagery. And this is where the sermon makes a truly radical point about economics and wealth. It totally challenges our modern assumptions.
I remember this part really struck me because it attacks that core American ethos of the self-made individual.
Oh, big time.
We just love that narrative, right? The solitary genius who builds an empire entirely with their own 2 hands.
Right. But the sermon dismantles that.
Mm.
It points out that in a free market economy, wealth isn't purely self-created in a vacuum.
It's part of a system.
Exactly. It is money that flows to you through a massive, pre-existing interconnected system.
Like you rely on infrastructure you didn't build
And labor forces you didn't educate.
and societal laws you didn't write.
Precisely. So by this biblical standard, anyone living in the U.S. is considered wealthy simply by virtue of existing within a system where capital flows so freely.
It's like you are just catching the water from a river that was already flowing.
That's a great way to put it. And the challenge issued here is profound.
What is it?
If you don't intentionally construct your life so that money and resources flow out of you to help others, you are participating in what the text calls the idolatry of the city.
Wow. The idolatry of the city. So you are hoarding what was meant to circulate.
Yes. And to make matters even worse, those corrupt prophets we talked about earlier, they actually enable this hoarding.
How do they do that?
Well, verse 28 says they whitewash this greed with false visions.
Oh, man. So they put a spiritual stamp of approval on it.
Exactly. They tell the wealthy leaders that God wants them to hoard everything.
It's just a perfectly closed loop of systemic corruption.
It really is.
And obviously, if the leaders are operating this way with like full spiritual approval, the general public is just going to mirror that behavior to survive.
Which brings us to the final domino, the people, in verse 29.
Right. What are they doing?
The text says the general public resorts to extortion. They oppress the poor and the sojourner, which means the immigrant or the outsider.
So the decay trickles all the way down until it infects every single level of daily life.
Every level.
You look at this cascading collapse. Predatory communicators, erased moral boundaries, hoarding leaders, and an exploiting public. I mean, it is a society of total systemic selfishness.
Everyone is just extracting value from the person below them.
It's incredibly bleak. So how does God respond to a society that has completely collapsed in on itself like this?
He looks for the one.
The one.
Yeah. Ezekiel 22:30 says God surveyed this entire landscape of corruption, and he looks for just one person to build a wall and stand in the breach.
Stand in the breach, like stand in the gap of a broken wall to protect the city.
Exactly. He was looking for someone to stand in that gap to save the land from destruction. Just one person willing to advocate and sacrifice for the whole.
The tragedy of the text is that he couldn't find anyone.
He found none. The corruption was just total.
That is so sad.
It is. But this brings us to the real theological climax of the sermon.
Okay, where does it go?
Because humanity couldn't produce that one person to stand in the breach, God sent Jesus to be that one person.
Wow.
Right? By sacrificing himself on the cross, he became what the sermon describes as the seed that falls to the ground and dies.
Because a seed has to be buried and cracked open before it can grow into anything.
Exactly. Through that ultimate act of self-sacrifice, that seed creates a massive tree, a completely new people of God.
A community defined not by extraction and hoarding, but by sacrifice.
Yes.
Which completely redefines how this new community is supposed to operate today.
It changes everything. And to explain this, the sermon brings in Luke 9:23.
Which is the famous instruction to take up your cross daily.
Right.
And, here's where it gets really interesting, because I realized reading this how deeply we have trivialized this phrase in modern culture.
Oh, we use it for everything.
We do. We use it constantly to describe these minor personal inconveniences. Like we say, oh, my annoying boss is just my cross to bear.
Or sitting in this terrible rush hour traffic every day? Well, that's my cross.
Yes. We reduce this ultimate historical symbol of brutal self-sacrifice into a synonym for a recurring annoyance.
It's actually kind of wild when you think about it.
We make it entirely about our hardship, but the sermon fundamentally rejects this reading.
It does. It clarifies that the cross is not your personal struggle with traffic or your diet or your boss.
It is strictly 100% a sacrifice made for someone else.
Yes. It requires a denial of yourself for the sake of an outsider.
So if you're sacrificing your time or your comfort or your resources to stand in the breach for someone who is lost, that is taking up your cross.
That distinction changes the entire metric of faith.
It really does.
And when we look at the conclusion of today's sermon, it forces this hard, uncompromising evaluation.
Let's hear it.
Your faith must be a benefit to someone else in the world. Period.
Wow, period.
If you are only practicing your faith for your own peace of mind, or your own comfort, or just to hang out with your own social circle, you are dragging yourself backward in time.
You are dropping yourself right back into that corrupt, self-serving society of Ezekiel 22.
Exactly. A church is not a cozy 80,000-seat club for its members to just sit back, enjoy the music, and soak in the atmosphere.
It has to be a family, but specifically a family built for the lost soul currently standing outside its walls.
And the sermon makes such a gentle but vital point here about the word sinner.
Because it carries so much baggage.
It does. But the sermon reminds us that sinner isn't this terrible, condemning slur. It simply means someone who has lost their way.
Just someone who lost their way. That changes everything.
When you view the outside world as people who have lost their way, rather than enemies to be fought or just demographics to be ignored, your entire posture changes.
It softens you.
Yeah. And the sermon actually diagnoses a massive modern problem through this exact lens.
Oh, what problem?
Well, it points out that the root cause of all this internal community conflict, all the church drama and infighting we see, it usually has very little to do with the specific issue being argued about.
So the fight isn't actually about the budget or the style of the music or the color of the carpet.
No, not at all. The conflict happens because the members have stopped carrying their cross for the people outside.
Oh, wow.
Their passion for the lost has just grown cold. And in that vacuum, they start prioritizing their own preferences.
So when the outward mission stops, the inward fighting begins.
Exactly. When you forget the one outside, the 99 inside start tearing each other apart.
That is so profound, and it just loops perfectly back to where we started.
With the stadium.
Right. The ultimate test of the community isn't how loud 80,000 people can roar together in a building. It's about who is willing to walk out of that stadium and find the one person who couldn't get a ticket.
It is the absolute rejection of the Ezekiel 22 mindset of extraction and the full embrace of the cross mindset of sacrifice.
Man, that is powerful. So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's bring this directly to you, the listener. The sermon leaves us with this incredible conclusion about faith requiring an external impact. But let's take that a step further into our own psychology.
Let's do it.
We often feel so burned out, right? So drained by the drama and the exhaustion within our own communities, our workplaces, our social circles. We think we are just doing way too much.
We all feel that fatigue.
But what if the exhaustion isn't from doing too much? What if it's from doing things entirely for the wrong group?
Wow.
If the cure for a collapsing society in Ezekiel was just one person standing in the breach for someone else, who is the one person outside your usual circle who actually benefited from your beliefs this week? Are you burning out trying to maintain a cozy club for the 99, or are you finding real purpose standing in the breach for the one?